سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب يسر ولا تؤسر وتممه لنا بالخير يا فتاه يا فتاه يا فتاح. Respected brothers and elders, mothers and sisters in Islam, truly it is an immense mercy, infinite karam and absolute blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon all of us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gathered us tonight once again to listen, to reflect, to comprehend, and to listen to learn the life of the most noble, the most prestigious, and the greatest man to ever walk on the face of this earth, which is the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, during the course of tonight's gathering, we will be going over the 8th session of our Seerah of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And tonight's topic, inshallah, will be the distinguished childhood of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just to be on the same page and to be on the same page for what we had done last time, we spoke about the noble and the honorable birth of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Quickly and briefly regarding that, as we already know and we have spoken about this many times, the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes from the most noble of the lineage. Jazakallah khair. Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself mentioned that from the humanity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the awlad, the lineage of Ismail alayhi salam. And from amongst from the awlad in Banu Ismail, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Kinana. And from amongst the awlad and the children and the progeny of Kinana, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Quraysh. And from amongst the people of Quraysh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Banu Hashim. And from amongst the people of Banu Hashim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the most fine, the most beautiful, and of course the most noble of the lineage was of the lineage of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Last time that we met, we spoke about the direct, parents of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the biological mother and the father of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah and Amina radiyallahu anhum ajba'een. As we had mentioned, that very little is known about them in the history, as we know that they got married in the late teens or early 20s of their lives, as we know that Abdullah passed away at a very young age, and we already spoken about this as well. The father of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah, was that individual who was supposed to be sacrificed for the cause that his father had taken an oath upon. If we all remember, Abdul Muttalib had taken an oath of sacrificing one of his sons, and that was Abdullah. But of course, at the end, he was let go of, and because of the shukr and being thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Abdullah, the father Abdul Muttalib decided to get Abdullah married. The person who was chosen to get married to Abdullah was from the tribe of Banu Zahra. From Banu Zahra, which is also from amongst the tribes of the people of Quraysh. And sometimes we misunderstand that the Quraysh themselves had many sub-tribes. Jazakallah khair. That Quraysh themselves had many sub-tribes. Amongst them was Banu Hashim, which was the greatest and the most elite of the tribes of Quraysh. One of them was known as Banu Zahra. Banu Zahra had a chief of him, and the name of the chief was Wahab. And Wahab had a daughter, her name was Amina. So the mother of Rasulullah ﷺ came from the lineage of also the Quraysh, but from the tribe of Banu Zahra, from amongst the people of Quraysh, and she was the daughter of the chieftain of the time known as Wahab. And of course the marriage took place. Not too long had passed when Rasulullah ﷺ's father went on a caravan and a journey towards Syria. While coming back, he fell sick in Yathrib. The people and the entire tribe came back, and of course, after a few months, the father of Rasulullah ﷺ passed away. According to some traditions which I shared last time with you, many scholars have mentioned that Abdullah might not even have known that his wife was expecting a child, or he himself was going to have a child, because he had only left less than a week after he had been married with Amina, and before him coming towards Makkatul Mukarramah, he passed away. We also covered a little bit of the essence of Abdullah, the brightness upon his face, and of course the nobility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him. We also spoke about Amina. We also spoke about her, of course, greatness and, of course, her lineage as well. Also, we spoke about a few of the things of the nobility of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ at the time of birth, his exact year when he was born, which was known as Amul Fil, the year of elephant. If you remember this hadith that I shared with you last time, Qubays ibn Ashyam radiallahu anhu was an old man. After the demise and the passing away of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu asked him, and this is the hadith of Tirmidhi. Qubays ibn Ashyam radiallahu anhu was asked, he says, أَأَنْتَ أَكْبَرُ مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم? Are you bigger than the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Which was a question, as a general question by Uthman radiallahu anhu. And Qubays ibn Ashyam radiallahu anhu so beautifully and so eloquently answered back. And he says, no, huwa akbaru minni wa asannu minhu. He said, no, the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is bigger than me, I'm just older than him. Meaning, this was the honor and respect he gave the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, huwa akbaru minni. He is bigger than me. The word akbar in use of comparison between individual. He says, no, I'm not greater than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even though Uthman radiallahu anhu was asking about age, but he very beautifully put by saying, huwa akbaru minni. That the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was bigger than me. Wa asannu minhu, but I'm just a little older than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, he also explains the years of elephant and how the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born. We also heard from the authentic narration last time that someone asked, oh Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why do you fast on Mondays? He said, I was born on Monday, and the revelation began on Monday. And to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I also fast on a Monday. So we know it was the year of elephant. It was the day which was Monday. And we also know from one of the narration that the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in mid-afternoon, meaning right in the middle of the day when the sun was at its climax, when the humanity was full of light and illumination around the face of this earth, which also defines the purpose of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sirajan munira. Indeed, he is a bright light to the humanity. He took away the darknesses from the face of this earth. We spoke about a little controversial issue last time, which was the exact year of the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which also is differed. Some have mentioned different days, the date of the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some have mentioned 12th, which is Ibn Ishaq, amongst the first of the writers of the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ in the first century. He says 12th day of Rabiul Awwal. But many of the authors, such as Ibn Kathir rahmatullah alayh, and many of the elite scholars have refuted and said it is not possible to be the 12th. They have focused upon the 2nd, the 8th, the 17th, and some of them have even mentioned that it was the month of Ramadan. So the month and date itself is differed according to the time. We also spoke about how the ritual of Milad and Mawlad actually began, which was never a tradition until the 570 years after the demise of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was in reality a group of individuals which were known as the Fatimides in Egypt, who actually came up with this entire idea of festivals and celebration, which was never done for 5 centuries in Islam. And we also spoke about these aspects as well. And of course, we continued further upon the actual birth of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that there are so many misconceptions. And I said this last time, which also is important for tonight as well, that sometimes we say so many things just to add miracle to the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Brothers and sisters, as I said last time, we don't have to add anything. His life is already miraculous. The Nabi of Allah ﷺ is enough praised. We don't need to bring in fabricated things to praise the life of Rasulullah ﷺ even better. Right? Saying that, the Prophet ﷺ was born and his finger was pointing towards the heavens, or he was already doing sajda. These things don't need to be brought inside Islam, which has no basis, just to think that we are elevating his status. Allah has already raised it, and he's already praised enough. We also spoke about some of the other essence of the birth of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How the aqiqah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was held on the 7th day by Abdul Muttalib, and Abdul Muttalib himself chose the name Muhammad for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. True traditions around Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the name. Some scholars says it was the first time that someone was ever named Muhammad in the history of universe. It was only unique for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second scholars have mentioned that no, Muhammad, the name itself was common in Arab, but it had gone away from the lives of Arab and Quraysh for centuries. There were individuals in the past who were known to be Muhammad, but it had gone away and vanished from the lives of individuals. So the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself brought this name back in the lives of individual. The last and final thing that I mentioned last time, which was beautiful, was Abu Lahab. When he received the news of the birth of his nephew, because Abu Lahab and Abdullah were brothers, Abu Lahab was so happy that the woman who had brought the message, her name was Thuwayba, He set her free, that I set you free, that you brought a message that my brother had a son, so you are set free. It is mentioned in the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Abbas radiallahu anhu reports in the hadith of Musnad Ahmad that Abbas radiallahu anhu said that I saw Abu Lahab in my dream. After he passed away, when I asked, did you get any concessions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being a relative of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He says, no, I didn't, but there's only one thing that I received. He said, what? He says, few times a day I get few drops and sips of water for the reason that I set Suwayba free on hearing the news of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is authentic narration of Musnad Ahmad, without any doubtful things and without any things brought up from any other places. We continue towards the distinguished childhood of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I say distinguished because it is so beautiful and so different in its class as well. And we learn that how every step of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was handpicked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it the most beautiful and of course lasting with so much examples to come until the day of Qiyamah. As we know that if you look into as I mentioned last time as well, if you look at the Meccan life and you look at the Medina life, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's entire Meccan life, including the prophecy and without the prophecy, is 53 years. 40 years of without being prophet and 13 years of being prophet. So that means 53 years of life in Mecca, 10 years in Medina. If you compare 53 years to 10 years, you will find one volume of work for 53 years, and you'll find 3 volumes of work for the 10 years. So the information which is stored in the history through ahadith, through seer, through sahaba, and through individual is much more on a later run than the early times of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we speak about early childhood, there are few things which are authentic, which can be found in the books of ahadith of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now some of the things which are known to be very authentic and which can be shared is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved everything which was supposed to be known for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stored it. Sometimes you say, oh, why aren't there enough information? Why isn't it stored? Whatever was the means of benefiting the ummah, Allah preserved this for this ummah. Whatever was not of importance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not preserve. So this is the thing that we should keep in our minds as well. The first and the foremost thing regarding the childhood of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was born in the house of Amina, and of course when he was just in the beginning of his infancy, the mother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course amongst the tradition of the elite of the Quraysh and the most noble of the Quraysh, was that they would send their children to the suburban area of Mecca, to the desert lands of Mecca. This was amongst the traditions of the people of Mecca. Not only every individual, but amongst the elite and the noble people of Quraysh. So Quraysh being amongst the most elite of the people of Quraysh, the Meccans, but amongst them, the ones which were known to be famous amongst them, which of course Abdul Muttalib's nephew, which was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is grandson, which was born. So now he's also known and famous and noble, even though he's an orphan now. The mother is trying to send this child to the suburbs, or they would say the desert land of Mecca. Now in our minds, how can you, right? A child who's born to a noble family, good individual, why are the elite of Quraysh doing so, right? Why are the people of Quraysh sending their young children to the outskirts of Mecca, to the desert lands of Mecca? What is the reason behind this? So scholars have mentioned many. I will share with you 7 reasons, inshallah, before we continue. First of all, we need to realize that at that time, it was as though a symbol of status from amongst the people of Quraysh, that our children have grown in the outskirts of Mecca. It was a symbol of status from amongst the elite and the noble of Quraysh. Amongst the people of Quraysh, whoever was the noble, they would send their children to the outskirts of Mecca. So it was the standard of, it was the symbol of status from amongst the people of Quraysh. Second thing was that they should be raised in a society which is pure and healthy environment. Because as we know, even now, and of course in some of the remote areas in the world that we know, and imagine more than 1400 years ago, that the rate of infant mortality was so high, right? Children were dying at all times. Diseases were so common. So when these children were sent to the suburban or the desert area of Mecca, they were less likely to interact with more people, because Mecca at that time was a central hub for people to come from all places. It was a place of trade from Syria and from the southern place and from the northern places, all over the place. And it was the place for pilgrimage, and individuals are coming in. And when so many people from so many places are coming in, disease and things like that are more likely to spread amongst the individuals. When children are sent to the suburban or the desert area, it is more likely that they will be confined to one family, few individuals, mom, dad, or maybe the few siblings that they have. These are the only individuals which will be around that child. So there is more safety, pure health, and of course pure environment for that child. So the elite of Quraysh, for the reasons of infant mortality, they would send the children to these areas so the children can be saved, pure life, and of course pure environment. And of course, the third thing was to save from plague, and of course save them from disease was the third thing that they did so. The fourth thing was to actually build stamina in the life of these children. The life, even though in Mecca as our thoughts, because of what Allah has given us as ease and comfort, but the time of Meccan life was compared easy to the life of the desert. So they would send their children to become strong and bearable for the times of difficulties and hardships. Many a times you will have seen and witnessed by your own sight the children who grow up in poverty, children who grow up in situations which are difficult, they're easily able to handle much more difficulty than those who are nourished and pampered in a very noble or so-called a household where ease and comfort is given them. So they learn to react to conditions. So to build stamina within the child, they would stem them, and of course to make them adjusted to the tough life. That when they come back to Mecca, Mecca should look like a piece of cake for them. Even though the life of Mecca was tough. But if they would live in the deserts and they would grow up in their adolescence and their infancy in a tough place, they will build stamina, and they will be ready to live a tougher life when they return back towards Mecca. Another reason that was there was to live in hardship, so the area of Mecca itself can give them comfort. And of course, when a person lives within family, and especially grandparents and as they say, uncles, they are very much pampered by their uncles and relatives more their own parents, right? Usually we have seen this in our own families, that every child is pampered or taken care of themselves by more than their parents, by their grandparents, right? They say, some people say the reason of grandparents is to show raham upon their grandchildren. Right? And my mom always says that when you have your own grandchildren, then in reality you kind of sort of begin to lose that love and connection with your own child, and you begin that connection with your grandchildren. That their happiness and smile becomes more adorable than your own children. That the respect and the connection of love is between grandparents and children. So when a child is away from all of this pampering, then in reality they are growing up to be more mature and living and more disciplined in their life, right? Many a time a child is disciplined by the mom and dad, and now who is there to intercede? Grandpa, grandma, anything. Oh, mom is telling me to do this, dad is telling me to do this. I can't eat ice cream now, it's too hot, too cold. Grandma and my grandpa is the one to give them all that they want. So that discipline issue is, subhanAllah, taken care of when a child doesn't live with all of the closest of the relatives. And some of the scholars I mentioned that amongst one of the reason was to actually send these children to make them the most eloquent in their languages. When you live in a society where people from different areas are combining together, it is more likely that you will lose the true essence of your language. And we have seen this. That when you live in a city where you have people from all over, your accent and the way that you speak begins to change and adapt from all different people. You live in a neighborhood where people speak a certain accent, you will begin to catch. Your own children will begin to speak in a certain way. That's why Mullah Ali Qari rahmatullah alayhi and the people of Tajweed and many of the people have written that if you want to read and learn the true pronunciation of the word Dad, the saw with the dot on it, wala-dhalin, he said, go meet a Bedouin who has never seen the city ever in their life. So you can learn how to pronounce the word Dad, because they have changed over time just by the interaction of so many languages. So when you're confined to a certain locality, that only the people of your own town are there, then in reality your language itself is preserved. So that's why when the people used to come and they used to take the children to the desert land or the suburban land of Mecca and the outskirts of it, so it was a reason of preservation. And that's why now if you look into our own languages, how much addition has come, right? You read your Urdu, or if you can, or Arabic itself, Urdu or Arabic magazines or anything like that, you will find like, 1/3 of the entire thing is all, English words and, out of the language itself, right? It reminds me of a funny incident. They said an Arabic brother, he came to Pakistan and he read a billboard, and he's trying to read this in Arabic, and it's written in Urdu. So he reads, he goes, Habiyam baynaka lam yatid. Guess what it is? Habib Bank Limited. So he goes, Habiyam baynaka lam yatid. Right? So subhanAllah, so many times, like what's Habib Bank Limited? This is all written in Urdu, but actually it's English. So he was reading Habiyam baynaka lam yatid. I don't know how that made, but anyways, so many a times languages over time begin to adapt from other places, and of course it becomes very difficult. So this was one of the reasons. Now we come to the essence of who took the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who was that elite family, or who were the noble tribes? So one thing that we need to realize is that not every single tribe of individuals were allowed to come in and take children. It was only few and chosen individual tribes from the people and the elite of Quraysh who were allowed to actually come in and take these children. These individuals were not the Quraysh, they were not the elite, but they were there who were trusted by the people of Quraysh. So they were individuals who were trusted to come and take the children who they had been dealing for a very long time. Amongst one of those tribes was known as Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr is that specific tribe, which was that famous tribe which took many children from the elite of the Quraysh. So Banu Sa'ad is also that tribe. Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr is also that tribe which also took the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is also that tribe for which the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also taken towards. There's a hadith of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam which he himself says, and the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, can you tell us something about yourself, O Prophet of Allah? Can you tell us something about yourself? So the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Ana da'watu Abi Ibrahim. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Ana da'watu Abi Ibrahim. He says, I am the essence or the result of the dua of my father Ibrahim. So he said, he defined himself, Ana da'watu Abi Ibrahim. I am the result or manifestation of the supplication of my forefather Ibrahim. And what is that in the Quran? After Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam completed the entire Kaaba, what did they make dua? Oh Allah, Rabbana wab'ath fihim Rasul. Oh Allah, send from amongst us a prophet who will come and guide the individual. So in reality, the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was from the dua of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. So when he was asked, can you tell us something about yourself? He says, Ana da'watu Abi Ibrahim. I am the result or manifestation of the dua of my forefather Ibrahim alayhi salam. And then he said, Wa ana bushra akhi Isa. And I am that glad tiding which my brother Isa alayhi salam gave. He says, I am that glad tiding for which my brother Isa alayhi salam was sent. And as we know that when Isa alayhi salam was sent on the face of this earth, what did he say? He said, I have come upon you so I can give you bashara. I can give you the glad tidings. Right? People think it was the gospel, but in reality it was the glad tiding of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he said, Wa ana bushra akhi Isa. That I am the glad tiding for which Isa alayhi salam came, and he told the people that I have to come on the face of this earth. And then he says, وَاسْتَرْأَدْتُ فِي بَنِي سَعَدْ بِن بَكْرٍ. And he says, and I am the one who was nursed by a mother in the tribe of Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. So this is how he defined himself. The dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the glad tiding of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, and a child which was nursed by a mother from a woman from the tribe of Banu Sa'ad bin Abi Bakr. Now, subhanallah, who was this woman and who had this honor and this privilege to become the foster mother of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Many of us have heard this incident so many times, but just to repeat and remind ourselves. This noble and this great woman, her name was Halima bin Sa'adiyah radiyallahu anha. Halima herself was who? She was the foster mother of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there's a narration that she herself relates. Halima as-Sa'diyah herself relates, and of course she became Muslim and she came afterwards, which we will speak about in just a few moments itself. He herself relates that, her husband and herself used to live in the tribe of Banu Sa'ad bin Abi Bakr. And they were going through a lot of tough times. They were going through a lot of monetary halat and conditions. And they just had a newborn. Halima had two children. One of the child that Halima and Haris had, and the husband of Halima was Haris. The first child that they had was, her name was Shayma. And of course the hadith of Shayma will come in just a few minutes. Shayma was approximately 7 or 8 years of age when Rasulullah ﷺ was taken by Halima as-Saadiyah. And the other child that Halima and of course Haris had was just an infant newborn. You were only allowed to take another child from the people of Quraysh, that it is only if you gave birth, right? Because of nursing and all the other issues. If you did not have a child which you just gave birth to, you were not allowed to take a baby because of the reasons of nursing and the flowing of the milk and of course all the detail. So now this woman, Halima and Haris, they are debating and they are saying, you know what, we're going through a lot of halat and conditions. You know, the economical condition in our house and everything is not running really nice. So what should we do? So they said, you know what, we just had a child as well. Why don't we go and take a child as adoption, or so-called fostering a child for a few years. And because of that, we will make some money and it will be okay for a house and we get the things going in our house. So the husband and wife said, you know what, that's a good idea. So the entire people of Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr got ready. As the women of the tribe, they all went towards Mecca. Once they reached Mecca, they went to all of the elite houses which were known to have children. They found children and it was told to them that there were few children which were born. And when they were told of a child which was orphan, some of the women of Banu Sa'ad did not even go to that house. They said it's not worth going to that house. And they left. Halima also went, but she left. And she did not take that child at once. She herself reports this, that I did not take the child and I also left thinking of looking at the reasons of poverty, even though it was Abdul Muttalib's grandson, but the father not being alive, we left because one of the reasons for us to come was to have some monetary help. She said we went around, and while we were going back, all of my friends from Banu Sa'ad had a child, had a kid with them. And I was the only one without any child. And I felt so uncomfortable. So I made mashwara and consultation with my husband Haris and said, what should I do? So he said, you know what, we should take this child with. So she says, are you sure? So he said, maybe he will bring some blessings and khair and barakah into our lives. Subhanallah, that even they themselves had the thought of taking care of an orphan and Allah will take care of us, right? Subhanallah, what's the condition today of orphans within our own lives and children that we know around the globe, right? Rasulullah ﷺ says the best house on the face of this earth is a house in which an orphan is taken care of. And the worst of the house is the house in which the haqq and the right of an orphan is not taken care of. Allah has given people so much, and so much can be done. We know so many people close to us, relatives and friends, that we can take care of them. But so much negligence in taking care of the orphans at this time. So now, Haris and Halima said that, you know what, let's take care of this orphan. Maybe some blessings will come to us. Taking care of this orphan. Even though we came for the reasons of money, but maybe some blessings will come to us. At this moment, Halima herself says, we took the child, and as soon as we took the child, the ride which we had was the slowest amongst all the other rides. And the animal that we had, the goat, was the weakest of all. And Halima herself, authentic narration mentions that as soon as I took Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the goats that we had began to fill their udders with milk. And the animals which was the slowest in its ride became the fastest of all. And people begin to say, oh Halima, is this the same thing that you came upon? And she began to say, yes, the ride is the same, but the rider has changed. Brothers and elders, mothers and sisters in Islam, I always say this incident, and I stop here for a few seconds and I want to share this with you. Today I say that the deen of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is like that orphan child in the city of Mecca. The deen is like that orphan child in the city of Mecca. We are not willing to take this orphan child. We are ready to embrace every other thing except for the tariqah and the orphan way of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But I take the oath of Allah and say, embrace this orphan deen of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Allah will show you izzat and respect, dignity and honor, prestige and ease and comfort in this life and akhirah, just by embracing the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now, subhanAllah, Halima took, and of course they begin, and she also, of course, took the Prophet of Allah ﷺ as a child, and this is the narration which ends at this specific moment. Usually, the custom was that when the children were taken back to the tribe of Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr, children were taken for 2 years. Children were usually taken for 2 years. This was the agreement that they had between the people of Quraysh. But now within these 2 years, subhanAllah, Halima had witnessed such blessings that she could not comprehend. She had seen such miracles. The udders becoming full of milk, the animals beginning to walk faster, the grass being more green on her side than all the other individuals that no one can even comprehend. So within the 2 years, she had seen so much barakat and blessings of having this child as a foster child that Halima was not ready to give this child back. The usual agreement was 2 years. You got to give the child back after 2 years. So now it's not working out. So now, subhanAllah, at this moment, it was not for the money anymore. It was for the reasons of barakah and blessings. And they truly realized. So now the second phase, it's not for the sake of money anymore. Even though the first time that they went, it was for the reason of money. But now they realized by taking and embracing the Prophet ﷺ that this child is worth much more than money. That indeed there is too much in this child to be labeled to any specific amount of money. So the amount of barakah and blessings that Halima and Haris had seen, so she went to Amina after 2 years had completed. And of course, they would go back every year and they would show the child that your child is healthy and complete. And of course, they can designate meetings and seeing their children. After 2 years, she went. And she went back to Amina and says, Amina, I think your child is not going to be safe enough in Mecca. He hasn't learned enough. He needs to be more there. And she gave all of that huge thing about the importance of him being in the Banu Sa'ad area and not being safe in Mecca. That being a mother who cared for the child, she said, you know what, Halima, okay, you can take him for a few more years. So now she was really happy because she had seen so much barakat that she did not want to go of the Nabi of Allah ﷺ. Scholars have mentioned it was the second phase of taking Rasulullah ﷺ that a great incident occurred, which is also famous through authentic narrations from the life of Rasulullah ﷺ. It is the second phase. Remember, it was not the first phase. 2 years had passed. The custom tradition had gone. She actually asked for extension for 2 more years. It is the second phase of Rasulullah ﷺ in Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. Usually children, after 2, they were gone back to their parents. Now the Prophet of Allah ﷺ has spent 2 more years. It is approximately 4 years of age that Rasulullah ﷺ is there. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ is playing with his, of course, foster brothers and sisters. And this is how the incident took place. This incident has been reported by Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu from the authority of Imam al-Muslim. Imam al-Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi is a kitab called Sahih al-Muslim, the authentic book of hadith. Imam al-Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi relates this hadith from the authority of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself told the story of Shaqq al-Sadr, the opening of the chest, of what happened. Brothers and elders, mothers and sisters in Islam, we believe, we trust this saying because this is a saying of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even though our minds and our thoughts cannot comprehend, the words are haqq and true because they are the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now what is he saying? Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu said, the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said, I was at the age of 4 years of age when Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam approached me. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I was playing with the children of the Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr tribe, along with his foster brother and sister, the brother who was born approximately at the same time, and of course Shayma, which was the older foster sister of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A man came and grabbed the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which was Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam. The children became scared and they ran far away. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that this person began to overpower me. And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I tried to fight back myself. What are you doing with me? He's 4 years old. Courage and strength from the beginning of the life of Rasulullah. So finally he struggled. Remember, an old man, a strong person, a 4-year-old child. But Rasulullah ever since the beginning, the courage, the strength of the Prophet of Allah. So he says he finally struggled and he got me to the ground and he forced me to the ground and he opened my chest and he took out the heart and he opened the heart and he cleaned it in a gold bowl which had Zamzam inside of it. The water of Zamzam was present. And within this heart, he took a piece of black fiber or black slitter or a piece which was black in its texture, and he threw it out. In the hadith of Muslim, Rasulullah ﷺ said, I was told by Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, and he said that this is Shaitan's portion that he had in you. This is what Rasulullah ﷺ said to Anas ibn Malik. That, that Jibreel ﷺ said that, oh Muhammad ﷺ, that this is Shaitan's portion that he had in you. To realize this, let's stop here for a second and realize what's happening now. There's a hadith of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, and we trust this, we believe this, and I know there are doctors, scientists, and all these individuals, they can have their own theories, and alhamdulillah, you can have, so I don't debate with you in any case. The Nabi of Allah ﷺ said, every child is born in the way that the shaitan pricks them and makes them cry. This is hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ. That every child on the face of this earth, when it's born, the shaitan pricks that child. Allah knows how that happens. With utensils, with everything, whatever he does. And that is the reason why the child begins to cry. Rasulullah ﷺ said in this authentic hadith. There's a very important hadith of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, which I will go to before I continue, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates insan as pure. Kullu mawludin wulida ala fitrah. Every child is born on nature, in fitrah, in purity. Then it is shaitan and of course the environment which makes this child go towards wrong. There's a very beautiful hadith of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, that whenever a child is born, with the birth of child, the Iblis, angel, and the Iblis, the shaitan, the devil, he designates and puts one shaitan, which is known as qareen, a partner, onto this individual. So sorry to say, brothers and sisters, all of us sitting here has a qareen. Some stronger, some weaker. This is hadith of Rasulullah, that every child which is born, Iblis, shaitan, makes one of his qareen, one of his disciples and workers, become a part of this individual. And that qareen knows us more than our own spouses, our own parents, our own children. Because that qareen is with us at every single moment that we move. And they know what we are doing. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in asked, authentic hadith. They said, O Prophet of Allah ﷺ, do you also have a qareen? Do you also have a qareen? Meaning from amongst the portions of shaitan which actually, makes with individual. So Rasulullah ﷺ said, yes, I also have a qareen. But then the Prophet of Allah ﷺ said, except that, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against him, now he has accepted Islam and he whispers me only that is which is good. He says everyone has a qareen which whispers to them wrong. Shaitan can never be held and said, oh shaitan, you grab me to do wrong. No. Shaitan only whispers in the minds and the thoughts of individuals to do wrong. Right? Maybe that's the Bluetooth that he got inside the hearts of people, just that connection of doing wrong. He doesn't have to come in and hold your hand to do wrong. That maybe that black portion which was chucked out and thrown out, maybe that is something which he got connecting as whispers for people. But Rasulullah ﷺ said, my qareen, with the power that Allah had given, I got him to accept Islam. And now he doesn't whisper me anything except for khair and good. So qareen is with everyone, wrong and false. So now when Rasulullah ﷺ is a child, this has happened to them. And of course this is something which happened to Rasulullah ﷺ by Jibreel alayhi salam, and the washing of the heart through Zamzam. This occurred 2 times in the life of Rasulullah ﷺ. And of course, the other incident was much later when Rasulullah ﷺ was, chest was open. That was approximately 45 years after this incident, more or less to an effect, or even 50 years according to some tradition, when Rasulullah ﷺ was taken to the Mi'raj. But there was one difference, that there was no black spot which was taken because it was already taken out, but the heart was washed and Rasulullah ﷺ was taken to the heavens. Why the water of Zamzam? I don't want to get into the detail of that, but I want to share with you one important thing, 2 important things. Whenever the Nabi of Allah ﷺ would drink Zamzam, he would make dua. Please learn that dua. If not in Arabic, please learn that in English or any language that you know. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ would ask for 3 things before drinking Zamzam. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'an. O Allah, I ask you for knowledge which is beneficial. Wa rizqan wasi'an. And I ask you for rizq and sustenance which is abundant. وَالشِّفَاءً مِّن كُلِّ دَاءٍ. And I ask you to cure me from every disease and every hardship. So these are the 3 things the Prophet of Allah ﷺ would ask for. He would ask for beneficial knowledge. he would ask for sustenance which is abundant, and third, cure and safety from all the disease. One hadith, the second thing before we continue afterwards, one thing about Zamzam I want to share with you tonight as well. The Prophet of Allah said, Al-ma'u zamzam ma shuriba lahu. And subhanAllah, brothers and sisters, only if we knew the strength of these words of Rasulullah. Authentic hadith, the Prophet of Allah said, the water of Zamzam is for anything that a man and woman intends for. Anything you make intention and niyat for, and drink Zamzam, Allah will give you. This is with the yaqeen that you should do. Al-ma'u zamzam ma shuriba lahu. The word ma in Arabic is common and am for anything. Ma'u zamzam ma shuriba lahu. For anything you ask Allah, Allah will give you. Only if you ask with the right intention. With yaqeen that Allah will give me. Knowledge and wisdom and wealth and health and success and honor. Anything you ask for, Allah will give you. It is only the yaqeen that one has to have before drinking that Zamzam. This is an authentic hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now Halima and Sadiya becomes really worried when the children, meaning Shayma and the other child, tells that one person came and he seduced the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he made him struggle and go to the ground. And now Halima Sadiya is worried. She sees the chest of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she sees a sign, a mark of openness and closeness, even though the chest is completely closed. Subhanallah, this is from the qudrat and the miracle of Allah. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, He could have made it such a way that no one could see it. But to leave physical signs until the day of Qiyamah. How it happens. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu himself reports that I clearly remember seeing the line running through the chest of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which had opened when he was a little child. Meaning this was a physical sign. So Halima Sadiya, when she had seen this, she became extremely worried. And she became extremely worried that something wrong can happen to the child. And she took Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam back to Amina. So after this incident, she was so worried that I won't be able to take care of this child anymore. With all these things happening around this child, it is best for me to bring this back. What is the spiritual benefit of this specific incident? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was puring Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the most purified life. The life which was the most purified life. The life which was dignified, the life which was respectable, Allah was preparing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for that. That no evil, no wrong, and nothing can come to the respectful, dignified, and the pure life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that can also be proven from the ayat of the Quran. Alam nashra laka sadrak. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to be told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayat of the Quran, have we not opened your chest? Alam nashrah laka sadrak wa wada'na anka wizrak. Some have mentioned that of course it means that Allah gave Islam and opened your chest for the truthfulness in Islam itself. But of course many mufassirin have mentioned that this ayat of the Quran, Alam nashrah laka sadrak, refers to the literal opening of the chest and shaqq sadr of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is mentioned 54 years passed. It is approximately 8 years, and of course I'm jumping the gun, this is just an incident that I want you to remember. It is approximately 8th year of Hijrah. 3 years before the demise of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, a battle known as Hunain took place. Inshallah, which we will speak about in future in much more details. All the tribes from the surrounding area of Mecca and the areas around that place, they began to accept Islam. Amongst the tribe which began to accept Islam and also accepted Islam and came to Rasulullah ﷺ in Medina, was the people of Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. So the people from Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr, meaning the place where he was fostered, those people of the tribe also came. And they were also taken into custody. So now some of them accepted Islam, some did not accept Islam. So while Rasulullah ﷺ is walking, and of course this is approximately the age of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, is approximately 3 years before the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, 8 years after Hijrah, that one of the women begins to, make some noise. So the Sahaba try to, tell her to relax. What are you doing? Why are you making so much noise? So she's screaming, I'm the sister of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm the sister of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they're saying, relax. How are you the sister of the Prophet? We never heard about you. Where did you come from? You're the sister. You just want to get out of here. That's why. So they came to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they say that there is a woman from the people of Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr and she's proclaiming to be your sister. O Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what should we do with her? So the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came back. And she says, do you remember me? I'm Shayma. I'm your foster sister. I am the daughter of Halima. So Rasulullah ﷺ said, of course it's been approximately 54, 55, even 60 years until that time, that how can I know that you are Shayma? Times have changed. Everyone wants to leave, wants to just quickly get out of this place. So how do I know you are Shayma? So she gave such a beautiful answer. She said, "Oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I still have the bite marks that you made on my back when I was carrying you on my shoulders when you were a little baby. Do you remember that day? That when you bit me on my back and you left a mark, I still have those marks. Indeed, I'm your sister Shayma." And the Rasulullah ﷺ began to tear at that time. And of course, the Prophet of Allah ﷺ embraced her and of course gifted her with so much grace and honor and respect at that time. After the place of Hunain had taken place, Halima and her husband themselves came. It was not that they were part of that time, after a time that they came. And when Rasulullah ﷺ had seen Halima Sadiya come, the Nabi of Allah ﷺ himself spread the sheet of cloth that he had, and he honored his own foster mother to sit, that in reality he never had a chance to actually live that much time and spend his time with his mother, which we will be speaking about in just a few moments. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ has now returned to his own mother. Now the things which are known between him and his mother is very less as well. The only thing which the history proves is one great incident. The 2 years of the time that he was with his mother Amina till the mother passed away at the age of 6 of Rasulullah ﷺ is only one great incident. After that, they had lived here in Mecca for a little while. The mother of Rasulullah ﷺ, Amina, decided to take Rasulullah ﷺ to a trip towards her parents, which were in Yathrib, in Medina. So 3 individuals began a journey. It was the mother of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, Amina. It was the Nabi of Allah ﷺ himself and a woman known as Aymin. Aymin was a servant which was given by Abdul Muttalib to his son Abdullah when he got married. Like nannies and stuff that take care of kids and children. So she was just a woman which was given by Abdul Muttalib because he was the chief of the entire people of Quraysh. So he gave his son on the birth of his grandchild that Aymin will take care of your child. And subhanAllah, Ayman's life, Allahu Akbar, not too much has been preserved, but she even lived until after Rasulullah ﷺ. And Ayman passed away in the Khilafah of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, a long time that she lived. We'll speak about her later at that time. So now 3 individuals began their journey. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ went, and it wasn't for a day or 2, but of course they stayed for a longer period of time. You travel so far and you need to stay for a little bit. Allah knows for how long that they stayed. 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. Now they are coming back. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ, Aymin, and of course the mother Amina radiallahu anh. When they are coming back, the mother of Rasulullah ﷺ falls ill. And they are on the mountains in the place known as Al-Abwa. Al-Abwa is a location between Mecca and Medina. That the mother of Rasulullah ﷺ falls ill. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had honored me a few years back that I was able to go and visit that place, not personally close to it, but a bit close to, a little distant to it. Nowadays, if you go to Abwa for this reason, they'll arrest you. There's so much security, they think it's all that wrong. A lot of things going out there. Anyways, so when we got there, we got about approximately 1 mile away from Abwa. I heard a lecture from one of the great shuyukh from Pakistan. He said that he had the honor to actually get in there and even see that place. Subhanallah, how he got there was amazing itself. So I was always in the thought that, I want to see that place. So alhamdulillah, we saw it from a mile's distance. The thing is that Abwa itself is small mountains and not even a single tree. It's black, dark, tough stones of the entire valley of Abwa. And wallahi, it just brings tears to the eyes of what resting place Allah chose for the best and the most noble of the mother on the face of this earth. Just increasing the sacrifice of his beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is mentioned in the books of hadith. Ayman herself relates, we're coming back, the mother fell ill. She began to, lose her breath, and she just falls down onto the ground. And the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is holding on to the chest of his mother. And he's crying and asking her to speak, but she's unable to speak. And this child who's approximately 6 years of age doesn't know what's going on. The only hope that he has is his mother. The only love that he completely has is his mother. And he's losing it right there. In front of his eyes, his mother begins to lose her life, and she breathes her life, and she passes away. Scholars have mentioned that no one actually knows how the burial took place. Maybe Ayman went around and looked for individual who can dig a hole and bury, but in reality, how would have been done? Now it is mentioned, Ayman says, Allahu Akbar. The Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam held on to the chest of his mother, and he would not let go. And he would say, Ayman, leave me, I want to stay with my mother. I don't want to go. And Ayman said, I just, snatched this child off. And I grabbed him and I hugged him and I took Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam away. And I would see him crying and looking towards the grave of his mother. And this is how I brought this young child back towards me. Now, subhanAllah, it is mentioned in one of the hadith of Sahih al-Muslim that once Rasulullah ﷺ was traveling with Sahaba, he was in a journey. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ was in a journey with Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een, and all of a sudden the Prophet ﷺ went towards the wilderness and he began to walk to a side that we had never seen him. It was, as they say, off-road. The Prophet ﷺ started walking towards the wilderness. Hadith of Sahih al-Muslim. The Sahaba said, we followed along. We didn't see anything. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ went and he finally reached a grave where he sat next to, and he went to, and he sat next to and he began to cry profusely. To an extent that he cried so much that the Sahaba said, we never seen him cry that much. If you look in the books of hadith, there are few places where Rasulullah ﷺ cried a lot. That incident, second incident when Rasulullah ﷺ lost his uncle Hamza radiallahu anh, third incident when the Prophet of Allah ﷺ lost his son Ibrahim at a very last portion of his age. When the son Ibrahim, which was born from Maria Qibtiyah, passed away. These were the 3 times that Sahaba heard him cry very loud. And there are many incidents as well, but famous ones. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ began to cry until his beard, his lihya, which was deep and thick according to the hadith, became full and saturated with so much tears that the Nabi of Allah ﷺ couldn't breathe properly. He cried so much, the Sahaba didn't ask any question. And because of the severity of this condition, the Sahaba said, we also started to cry. Seeing the Nabi of Allah ﷺ, we cried and we wept so much. And after seeing this, the Prophet of Allah ﷺ said, "O my Sahaba," this hadith of al-Muslim, "I used to forbid you from going to the qabur and the graves." In the beginning of Islam, it was not permissible to go visit the dead. You can just bury them. Once you bury them, that's it. You can't go visit them. In the beginning, I used to stop you from going and visiting the dead. And then Rasulullah ﷺ said, I asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow me to visit the grave of my mother. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, I asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow me to visit the grave of my mother. And then the Sahaba said, we realized that this was the grave of the mother of Rasulullah ﷺ. And then the Prophet of Allah ﷺ said, now from this you are allowed to go and visit the graves. And of course, there's so much jurisprudence and rulings regarding to how and when to do so. So some of the scholars have mentioned that from the barakah of the visitation of Amina, the mother of Rasulullah ﷺ, it became allowed to the ummah of Rasulullah ﷺ to also visit. Now a 6-year-old child loses his mother, loses his father. A child who is growing up through such severity and difficulty. Ibn Ishaq mentions that Abdul Muttalib, of course, now the child came to the custody and of course, the guardianship of his grandfather Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib being a chieftain. There are 2 incidents regarding Abdul Muttalib and Rasulullah ﷺ in his infancy which are authentic. It is mentioned that Abdul Muttalib was the chief of Mecca. And he had a raised platform attached to the Kaaba. When the sun had gone down and the shadow of Mecca and the Kaaba was there, he would put his throne, which was like the king's throne kind of thing. The chieftain's throne was put. And Abdul Muttalib would sit on top of it and he would answer the questions of the people of Quraysh. And of course the different individuals who would come for different issues. No one was allowed to sit. He had 10 sons, 5 daughters, so many grandchildren. No one was allowed to touch. One day Rasulullah ﷺ being in the state of infancy, he came at the age of 6, he jumped on top of the throne. And he sat where Abdul Muttalib sat. At this moment everyone rushed. Even his own uncles, Hamza and of course other people. And they say, you can't sit there, this is only where Abdul Muttalib. And at this moment, Abdul Muttalib hugged Rasulullah ﷺ's head, and he says, there is no one except for Abdul Muttalib, then this child who is allowed to sit on this throne. Meaning Allah is showing the signs to the humanity of the honor and the dignity of Rasulullah ﷺ. It is mentioned that once the uncles of Rasulullah ﷺ lost some camels. Ibn Sa'ad mentions that once the uncles of Rasulullah ﷺ lost some camels. So they told this child, between the age of 6 to 8, they told this child, why don't you go to the desert and get us our camels? So he said, okay, you're my uncle, I'll go get your camels. And why did they choose him? They said that whenever this child does something, he gets barakah and blessing and he gets the things done. Ever since the childhood, we have seen that whatever you put this child inside, he will get the things done. So they say, you know what, that was the only person and only reason that we had sent him. That he's always successful in whatever he does. So they chose Rasulullah ﷺ. Long time occurred, Rasulullah ﷺ didn't return back until night. Abdul Muttalib became worried, and at this moment he told his sons, where did you send my grandson? They said, we sent him to get some camels because he's always successful in whatever he does. At this moment, Abdul Muttalib said that indeed you have not done the right thing. He waited for Rasulullah ﷺ on the outskirts of Makkah. When the Prophet ﷺ came, he hugged him and he said, indeed, you are that child of mine that I will never let go of. Meaning the love that he had for the 2 years period that he was with Abdul Muttalib. Not too long had passed that someone, Abdul Muttalib also passed away from the face of this earth. There's a hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ, someone asked, O Prophet of Allah ﷺ, do you remember anything about Abdul Muttalib? Authentic hadith. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ said, yes, I do. I only remember that I was the age of 8 when my grandfather Abdul Muttalib passed away. So we realized that 4 years, he came back from Halima Sadiya to the mother at the age of 6. 6, his mother passed away. 2 years he stayed with Abdul Muttalib. And of course his uncle passed away at that moment as well. Before Abdul Muttalib passed away, he gave a bequest, a will. And he says that after I pass away and I die, the one who will take care of my son, meaning grandson Rasulullah ﷺ, will be Abu Talib, the paternal uncle of Rasulullah ﷺ. Reason why Abu Talib was chosen, because Abu Talib and Abdullah were the same, were brothers, were full brothers, meaning their mother and father was the same, right? There were many brothers, as Abu Lahab was not their full brother. So Abdullah, the father of Rasulullah ﷺ, and Abu Talib were full brothers. Now, subhanAllah, what a great thing. 3 times, I say, 3 times, this child became an orphan, right? 3 times. Losing of the father, losing of the mother, and of course, losing of the grandfather as well. Why so much trials in the childhood of Rasulullah ﷺ? Scholars have mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to show this to the humanity, that my Nabi has been raised in the care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That there's no guardian of his Habib except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah wanted, He could have made him live within his own parents, in the most luxurious of the most comfort of the life. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to make sure to leave this message that my Habib has been raised in the care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And no one can ever say that we favored Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No one can say that we favored him. It was the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And being an orphan gives a person so many qualities, right? So many qualities that we have seen, that young children living in the amount of lives that they reach maturity at such a young age, right? Children of young age becoming orphan, and you see them so mature because of the halat and conditions which does them. Final incident which inshallah we'll mention and we'll be done with this. This narration indeed is something which is debatable, which is present in many books of hadith and many books of Seerah, and also has mentioned this. But this incident is very debatable, and I will mention this at the end, we'll finish. It is mentioned that when Rasulullah ﷺ was transferred from, of course, Abdul Muttalib after his demise to Abu Talib, his uncle, the Prophet of Allah ﷺ took a journey to Syria, right? The famous incident of Buhaira and all the things that we always hear. So now what happened? There's a hadith which is reported in Sunnah al-Tirmidhi. Tirmidhi is one of the books of hadith which is authentic book. It is mentioned that Rasulullah ﷺ was taken by his uncle before he had reached the age of puberty, around 10, 12, less than that. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ was taken in a journey by his uncle Abu Talib, along with Abu Bakr and Bilal. Keep these 2 names in mind. And these 3 individuals were taken by Abu Talib, and they went on a journey. This is a hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi. They went on a journey. They were going towards Syria. They stopped in a way, and there was a man known as Buhaira the monk. He was, I guess, the big shot of that time. Meaning, people wanted to meet him, but he never came out of his disclosed place. But once when he saw the Prophet of Allah ﷺ along with Abu Talib, he himself came out and he heard about him coming. He welcomed them and he invited them to a feast in his house. Meaning a man who never came out of his house. He invited Abu Talib and of course the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr and Bilal who was with them. And he invited them to the house, and of course he gave them the feast. While they were sitting together, Buhaira said, Abu Talib, I see few things in this child. I've seen the cloud shadowing upon him. And I've seen the trees shadowing upon him. And I also see that the stones, do sajda and prostrate in front of this child. In midst of us is a prophet of Allah. And this child does have the signs of prophecy. So make sure that you take care of this child. At this moment, the hadith of Tirmidhi mentions 7 Roman soldiers came. They were looking for the child or the person who was going to be becoming a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They came in, they looked. Buhaira hid Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Talib, and from the back entrance he let them go. And that's the time when Abu Talib decided to bring Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam back because of this science. Now this is narration mentioned in many books of hadith. Many stories and books have mentioned this. But there is a little contradictions or some questions which are raised in this specific story. One of them is Allama Dhahabi rahmatullahi alayhi writes, he says, Abu Bakr was a young child. Right? If Rasulullah was 10, Abu Bakr was 8, radiallahu anhu. And he was not even related to Abu Talib. So how is an 8-year-old's mother going to send him? The second thing is, Bilal was not even born when Rasulullah was 10 years of age. So things don't play its role, right? It doesn't come to place that the entire incident. Okay, if you leave these two individuals out, imagine that these two names were just extra. There was some other Abu Bakr, maybe there was some other Bilal, and they went. And when they reached there, and Buhaira had said that this child sees the signs of prophecy and prophethood, then why did not Abu Talib accept Islam when Rasulullah announced the prophecy at the age of 40, right? After 35 years of this incident, or more or less, why did not Abu Talib realize and remember that, oh, Buhaira had told me that this child is the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So some scholars have mentioned that the story is authentic. Some have mentioned that this is not authentic. But this is some of the essence of the beginning and early and distinguished childhood of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through these hard conditions, is raising the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the level of the greatest man to ever walk on the face of this earth. The qualities, the sifat and the attributes from the beginning of his age and infancy is being given and granted to him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take great works from his Nabi Habib Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to live our life according to the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah give us the true love of the life of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to live our life as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be pleased with us. Inshallah, if the brothers and sisters do have any questions, inshallah, we can quickly take so at this moment, inshallah. Yes. They don't? Brother, if you go to Hamza Masjid's YouTube channel, inshallah, you will see playlist. If you click playlist, there is something called Seerah. And inshallah, you will see all 7, inshallah, this 8th one as well. And there are many other scholars, mashallah, who are always coming into this masjid as well. So their programs as well, inshallah. So you can go to YouTube and type Masjid Hamza. Once you go to it, inshallah, you will just click on playlist. And there will be many tabs like, tafsir and this and that. One of them will be called Seerah. If you press it, inshallah, you're going to find all 7, 8 of them, inshallah. Barakallah fikum, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu wa la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ameen, ameen, ameen. Birahmatika ya rabbal alamin.